So yes, my disclosures. I wish I wasn't clean. I wish I had all sorts of money from people who were nefarious, but I continued to beg because I don't have that sort of money to do a lot of this stuff. So I just wanted to provide a slide of context. We're in quite a big business. And if you look at it, we have a lot of publishers, we have a lot of journals, they produce a lot of manuscripts, and some of those get published. And that's the legal group. If I were to include the predatory journals, these numbers would go up very significantly. So I'm going to now do a little bit of the sort of Debbie Downer technique from Saturday Night Live and give you some sort of disappointing news. Authors appear to have some difficulty giving some very basic information, for example, on interventions in cancer trials. And it's been noted that actually if we don't provide relevant information, it's difficult to take this evidence and use it in practice, because presumably we're doing this research to make some sort of change on patient care. And if this information is missing, then I think we're in quite a bit of trouble. 329 has been alluded to several times today. I simply want to mention it because, again, it's another example of us being unable to use published information to guide patient care. And even, upstream, if we look at protocols, there's lots of examples of in protocols where we would hope to really capture this information in terms of being better reported is missing. And that's across the spectrum of publications. So a lot of this information was trapped in a series published in The Lancet in 2014. And there's literally hundreds of references that you can go and look to about, the publication record. And what's really important too, and what was alluded to this morning, that all of this information has passed peer review and editorial approval. It simply hasn't come into the journal in some mysterious way. It's passed what we consider to be an important filter. So there are some ideas. We've sort of looking to the future. What could we do to sort of try to make things better? And that's what John and Steve asked us to think about. So one is, I'd like to suggest that we could actually train train editors, scientific editors, around core competencies. And so what might those core competencies be? Well, there is a method that we are trying to move forward on, and we have a number of partners, the World Association of Medical Editors, the Committee on Publication Ethics, lots of other groups. And so a core competency could be to actually train scientific editors to look at registries when they're receiving reports, complete reports, for example, of randomized trials. And simply stated that not training scientific editors is not going to instill confidence in readers, and I think we need to do something about that. So we might want to develop core competencies, we might want to tailor training to that, we might want to think of, badging, what was mentioned this morning. I think we tend to call it kite marking. And we need to think about continuing scientific editor training. This is sort of a lifelong thing that we really need to think about. I would like to propose that we really think about a similar type of model for peer reviews. I certainly wasn't trained as a peer reviewer, and I suspect that a great number of people in this audience weren't formally trained in to be good peer reviewers. And what are our core competencies for peer reviewers? And we need to establish what those core competencies are, and we need to then tailor training to those. And I think that we could really bring it into a continuing medical education-like system within academic centers. There is a disconnect between what editors want and what peer reviewers want. This is a nice piece of work recently published by Philippe Ravaud's group, showing this sort of disconnect between what are important features for peer reviewers versus what editors think. it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to get funding for a lot of this work. And I'm just putting here a quote from a large journal. I don't want to give away too much information, but it's really not to embarrass the journal, but I think that the sentiment is what I want to share with you, is that everybody thinks it's a great idea, but nobody wants to fund it. And it's really the same across the board, trying to move this whole field forward. Training authors would be a good idea as well. We don't appear to have any formal training for writing in academic medical centers. Of course, I'm sure they're available in a very few centers, but I'm really talking across the board, across the world. There's very, very little out there for authors as well. I'm just going to move along to some other thoughts and ideas in terms of what we could do. There was mention earlier today about all trials. My question is, do we need an all trials-like campaign to improve the biomedical record? Something that we're trying to work on. We'd do a lot better if we had some money to really put to it, but it is sort of a campaign like all trials. Do we need an observatory to monitor any change over trials, over time, should I say? So this morning there was some discussion about the TOPE criteria, and there's lots of other criteria that have been proposed. But are they having any effect? How are they being implemented? How are they being endorsed? And are they provoking any change over time? And if we don't monitor it, we're not going to know. And I think one of the issues that we looked at when we tried to evaluate the Lancet series is that there's really no collaborative effort going on. There's some very individual activities going on, but nothing collaborative. I stole this from Frank, which I let him know. I think we need to move a little bit away from I activities and move a lot more towards we activity. And I activity is this, in my opinion. The NIH came out with some reporting guidance for preclinical research. The problem is it overlaps with the already existing ARRIVE reporting guidelines. It's very unclear how editors are endorsing and implementing both of these in journals. This will be confusing to authors, and what will authors do? They'll throw both of them out. And so I don't think we're getting very far that way. So I think, my view is to move away from that. Here is some we activity, I believe. Leighton Chan was interested in implementing reporting guidelines in the area of rehabilitation medicine. He worked initially with about 25 journal editors, got them on board, and there's now nearly 40 journals in the area of rehabilitation medicine that are using reporting guidelines, and they're developing tools to implement them across the board. So I think that will reduce competition, and actually it may make authors sort of perhaps behave better. I think another root of the problem in terms of trying to work at changing things for the future, which was alluded to earlier today, is the sort of academic incentives and rewards. I think we have a perverse system of publish, 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 and it's all about volume. And I'm not sure that there's any evidence for it, and certainly in my earlier slides, I would propose to you that it's evidence that actually that publication model in terms of an incentive and reward does not work. And we probably need to think about rebooting the incentive and reward system. I think we do need to change the minds of traditional funders. I know it's a very depressing episode for me when I go to Canadian funders and they say, well, we fund research in cancer, we fund research in cardiovascular disease, and what we're talking about goes across the board. Peer review problems are not unique to cancer journals, they're problems that are unique across the board. And I think it seems to me that there are groups such as HEROES, which to me at least, they're stealth organizations that would be very useful if they were more transparent and they could participate in some discussion about how to move things forward. Thank you.